make sure my recorder is hooked up. Yep, recorder is hooked up. All right. So the homework assignment is catch that bouncing ball. So I'm going to read my own homework assignment description just to make sure that I follow. I resized the screen in another classroom, and it is a much higher resolution thing, so I have to move. So have you guys heard that we are moving ahead to have a new building built for liberal arts to replace all of these classrooms? Okay, so that's going to happen in about a year or so. We'll finish the design, and then we'll actually start to demolish all of these older liberal arts buildings, and then a multi-story building will be built in place. And then all of these classrooms will have to move to temporary buildings first. So all the labs, all the offices, they all have to move for about a year and a half, because that's how long it will take to demolish these buildings and build a new building. And then after that, we'll move into the new building. So if you guys have any idea of what you want in a new classroom, let me know, because I'm actually on the committee to talk to the architect. So one thing is the positioning of the screens. That would be a kind of a no-brainer. All right, so let me see if I can make this a little bit better. It's not going to be a whole lot better, because this is really the best you can do. All right, so in this particular homework assignment, we have to make a bouncing ball, and the sprite itself is going to respond to clicks, and it will change the background color when it's clicked for half a second, 500 milliseconds. And then after that, it has to return back to normal. All right, so let's go ahead and see how we can do that. So this is what I usually do, is I will show you guys how to create the app that you're supposed to write. Unless the class has a consensus and go like, no, don't waste your time, we know how to do it already. That's usually what I will do. Continue. We have to start the emulator. And I'll just say start a new project, and I'm going to use my name and bounce as the name, because that's what you are supposed to do, is to use your last name and then uppercase B for bounce to name your project. So the first thing you need to do is to pick out a the screen is just not wide enough to do everything. So you need to go to drawing and animation and pick out a canvas and put it here. Now, because in this particular project you don't need to do anything else, you might as well just maximize the height and also the width. But it's not required. If you fix this to 300 by 300 or whatever, that's fine too. And then after that, you pick a ball sprite and put it here. There's no specification of how big the ball sprite is supposed to be, so you can just take the default size, which is a little bit harder to click. If you want to make it a little bit easier to click, you can increase the radius. So if you increase it to say, let's say 20, it's a whole lot easier to click, because the sprite itself is a lot bigger. Once again, it's your option. You don't have to do this. And then you have to set up the speed and also the interval. You just have to set up the speed to a certain thing. It doesn't have to be a particular number. So I'll just start with 10 to start with. Okay, I think 10 is already pretty fast. Okay, so this is it. Okay, and as soon as I start the emulator, the ball will start bouncing. Okay, because it already has a speed and an interval associated with it, and everything is already enabled and visible. So as soon as we get AI companion started in the emulator, you will see the ball bouncing. and then we can attach code to the various events to get it done. How much time did it take you guys to get this assignment done? 3 to 4 hours. Okay, about that. Okay, but we did have a long weekend. Right. Yep.
Well, this is loading up. Will the ball actually bounce back away from the edges since we haven't told it in the code to bounce away?
It
from
would
the
not.
edges? Okay.
Yep. So we'll see, it's not going to bounce. Instead, it will slide on the edge until it hits a corner. Then it will stop. Oh, it just did that. Oh, yeah, there you go. So, it stops right there because, I think in this case, the direction it's going is, okay, if you look at the direction, heading is 0. So it's going horizontally. So that's why, it just hits one corner and it just stopped. But if you make it 45 degrees, then it should go at an angle, and you can see that it's basically sticking to one particular corner and then stops. All right, so we have all the basic stuff done without a single block to specify the logic. Okay, it doesn't bounce, it doesn't do the change the color of the screen for half a second, but it got most of the stuff done. Okay, which is kind of impressive because you don't have to write a single line of code or a single block of code in this case to get this to get this far. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is I always go back to the homework assignment so that I can refer back to the description to make sure that I don't miss anything. So I'm going to move my homework assignment tab right next to the project tab, so this way it's easier to switch back and forth. All right. So you're free to choose the background color of the canvas and the color of the ball. I just stay with the defaults because that's not important. Program the sprite to move and bounce off of the boundaries automatically. So I'll do this step first. So going back to the project, which is the next tab here, we go to the blocks and then we say, okay, what can we do with this? So we look at the ball, okay, and we look at all the events that the ball can generate. It can collide with another sprite, which is not what I want. Okay? It can be dragged. It can detect that it has reached an edge. Maybe that's what I want. Because according to the description here, this event handler is called when the sprite reaches an edge of the screen, which is actually incorrect. Okay, remember last time I said it's not really the edge of the screen, it is the edge of the canvas. Okay. If bounce is then called with that edge, which edge are we talking about? The parameter right here. Okay, so if this edge is is used when you call bounce, the sprite will appear to bounce off the edge that it has reached. So that's all we need to do, is to use the bounce block of a sprite and use edge to as a parameter to specify how it is supposed to bounce. And bouncing is something that something that ball one can do. So we just take out this block here, stash it here, and then okay, go ahead, dismiss. And what we need to do is to use edge and put it here. Okay. So the app right now, is already modified where the ball is bouncing all by itself. Okay, but at least that's what we should be seeing in the emulator. So we'll switch to the emulator, and just to make sure that that's what it's doing. Okay. Aha! It's already bouncing, and this is the only piece of code that we have specified up to this point. So it takes time to figure out, what to do with this particular event handler, and what to pass to the bounce block. So that takes a little bit of time. Is that what is taking some of your time, is to kind of figure out the documentation and which block to use and stuff like that? Yes. Okay. All right. Okay, so that part is done. We go back to the homework assignment. And you can see that I don't write the entire application before I test it. I do it very interactively. I do a little bit of coding, test it first, and then go back and do some more coding. Okay. Alright, so next we want to make the canvas and or sprite touch sensitive. So it's up to you to decide which one you want to make touch sensitive. If a user clicks on the sprite, change the background color of the canvas for 0.5 seconds, then return color back to normal. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is just to make sure that I can, in fact, handle that particular event. So in the code, in the block here, I'm going to go back to ball1, and basically say if ball1 is, okay, it's one of these, okay, it's not colliding with another sprite, not dragged, not reaching the edge, we handled that one already. It's not flung, no longer colliding with. So now we are only down to the 3 touch-based events. If we look at the documentation, touchdown is when the user begins touching the sprite. Okay. This one is when the user let go, okay, lift the finger. And this one is basically registering when the user touches the sprite and immediately lifts fingers. So I'm going to pick this one as the event that I want to handle. And I don't even want to bother to really do much about the background color change and stuff like that. So I'm going to change the background color to a random color, just so that I can see that I can register this event. So I go to canvas and make the canvas change its background color. Or I can make the ball change the color too. Either way is fine. Okay, let's make the ball itself change its color. So I go to the ball and I can change its color. Or where's the color thing? The paint color. Okay.
We have a background color.
Sorry?
We have a background color.
The background color?
Yeah.
I don't think it's a big ball.
No, the ball doesn't have a background color. The ball has a paint color, I think. So we changed the paint color of the ball. This is not what your assignment is supposed to do. I just need a confirmation that I can register. Okay? So I would just change it to a random color. So we go to color and just say, okay, we'll just go ahead and make a new color out of random numbers. I demonstrated this before. Okay, we just picked out the random numbers. And typically you want to make this range go from 1 to 255. And this is just for testing. Remember, it's not going to be in the final code. So I'm really just testing this code by randomly changing the color of the ball if I touch it successfully. So I go back to the emulator and see if I can touch it. Touch. Okay. So that's good. This is confirmation that I can actually register the touch event. Okay. So the next thing I now have to think about is, okay, now I have to change the background color, but I only want to change it for half a second. Okay. So now the question is, how do I know half a second has passed? The clock, the timer event. Okay. So that means I have to go back to the designer because I need to include a clock. A clock is actually in the sensors category, and now we have clock 1 as a non-visible component. Then I go back to blocks. Okay, the other thing we have to do is to go to clock 1, go to its properties, and turn off always fires. Because always fires means at the end of one timer event, it will automatically start the countdown again. So in this case, because the default is 1,000 milliseconds, it means every second it will trigger the timer event, which is not what we want. Okay. We also want to turn off timer enabled, which basically means because when timer enabled is checked, it means it will start the countdown. I don't need the countdown until the sprite is actually touched. Okay, so I can turn off both of these. The timer interval, according to the homework assignment, is only supposed to be half a second, not an entire second. So I change it to 500. All of these can be changed in the blocks. Okay, but there's no need to really do anything else. So we'll just go ahead and initialize all of these things first. Then we go to blocks, and we get rid of this little thing here because we don't want to change the color of the ball after all. Because what we do want to do is to change the background of the color. Change the color of the background of the canvas for half a second. Okay. So the first thing we do is to go to the canvas and say, hey, canvas, I want you to change the color. So we'll go to the background color of the canvas and set it to something else. Now, I don't really need it to be very fancy, so I just change it to maybe this color here, kind of like a pinkish salmon color. But then the second thing I have to do, which is very important, is go to the clock and say, hey, let's start the timer. To start the timer, you have to go to the property and go to the property timer enabled, and you have to set timer enabled to true, which is under logic, like that. So what that would do is going to start the timer as soon as the ball is touched. And the interval is already set to 500 milliseconds, or half a second, which means the timer event will happen in 500 milliseconds. But if you go back to the emulator, it's not going to behave any differently. So I can click it. It changes the background color, which is good. But it doesn't revert back to the original color because nobody is handling the timer event yet. So that's the next thing we have to do, is to specify, okay, so after 500 milliseconds, what are we going to do? Go back to the blocks, okay, which we are already in. This time we have to deal with the timer event, which is something that the clock one, which is an event for the clock one. And this is the event handler. If your timer has gone off, okay, so we just put it here. And the only thing we have to do is to change the background color back to the usual color. So you can just duplicate that block here, stash it here, and pick out the original color, because I just used the default, which is a white color. This is how I set it back to the original color. Go back to the emulator, and this time I can click on it. You can see how it changes the color for pretty much half a second, and then reverts back to the normal. And that's it. That's your homework assignment. Unless I missed something. Did I miss anything? No, that's about it. Okay. All right. Are there any questions about this particular app?
Can you, I just was trying to see what you, behind
The blocks?
Yeah.
Okay. And let me just double check and make sure this class is still being recorded, because I think that would be useful. It is being recorded. Okay, there we go. So what I can do is I can save this project, host it on Moodle. So for those of you who want to download this as a project, you can do that. Okay? And you can use my solution as the basis of your new project, which is based on this one. So for those of you who completed this homework assignment without any problem, you can go ahead and use your own project as a starting point, or you can choose to use mine as a starting point. I don't really care which one you use. Okay? Oh, I want to point out something else, okay? As we start to add more logic to the blocks, sometimes, we look at the blocks and we don't know, okay, but why are we doing this, okay? You can actually comment your code, okay? Commenting is a very important thing when it comes to writing programs, especially when your code gets complicated. So you can right-click on something and you can just select Add Comment. What that will do is it gives you a little question mark here, okay? You click on the question mark, and it allows you to type whatever you want, okay? As long as it's just plain text, you can type whatever you want, and it will be associated with the block where the question mark is. So if you want to, just kind of comment here and say, change color for 0.5 seconds, which is what the event handler is supposed to do. This is what you can do, okay? And you can hide it. If you click the question mark again, it will hide the comment, and you can click it again, it will display the comment. This can be helpful when you are writing your code and you're writing something that's complicated. You can explain what you're doing with a particular block in English, in your own words, okay? That's one way to use comments. I use comments for something else. When I'm coding and I have an idea of how to do something, but I haven't gotten time to do it yet, I would do a comment block and just say to do, okay? And I would just describe briefly how I think I should go about doing that, because sometimes I forget. Okay. So in other words, let's take a look at the new homework assignment. and then we'll go back to this block here. But before we do anything else, I am going to save the project.
Can you
Or-
show how we copy any like commands to another project?
Okay, we can do that, sure. But the first thing I'm going to do is I will import project. Nope, I want to save project, export. There we go. We want to export select project to my computer. So I have my bounce program, export it, save the file, and I can now upload it onto Moodle. And in fact, I'm going to upload it all the way to the homework assignment itself. So when you read the homework assignment again, there will be a file attached, and that's the solution to the homework. So let me go to editing, edit settings of the homework assignment, and I will attach the solution to the homework itself. Because I have to find out where it saved my file. It is probably in my downloads folder. It's based on my name and then the bounce. That. Upload the file. And make sure I click save, because otherwise you won't see it. There we go, save and return to course. So now when you look at the homework assignment, there should be a file attached to the homework assignment, which is the solution that I just made today. Is that okay? All right? Yep.
How does it, maybe this is just obvious, but how did the blocks, is there any kind of timing sequence with one block on the other? Does it really matter? It doesn't seem to.
It depends on what you call timing, because in this particular application, this is the block that starts the timer. Okay, the one that I have just highlighted here. So I can right click on this one and just add comment, and I would just say that this block starts the timer. Okay, is that okay?
Yeah, I guess, if it's reading the program,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter where anything is.
Oh, you mean the positioning of the blocks? Yes, the positioning of the blocks do not mean anything when it comes to the whole thing. So when you let me see if I can understand your question. So you mean when you move this thing over here, does it change anything?
Yeah, or maybe you even wrote the code differently so that a timer is in another section or something. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Basically,
Okay, so the normal flow is from top to bottom. So when you have several blocks and they are right next to each other, then it will execute from top to bottom when the blocks are connected. So when you have event handlers, then it doesn't matter how you position the event handlers, because they are not connected. But with these two blocks, they are connected, right? So that means when they execute, the top one will execute first, and then the next one will execute. Now with these two, it really doesn't matter which one you start first. You can start the timer and then immediately change the background color. It's not visible to the human eye. That little lag, the time difference, is not going to be visible. So there are certain things where the order does not really matter. You can resequence the whole thing, and then there are things where the sequencing is really important. You have to do one before the other. Yep.
In the timer section, shouldn't you have time enabled to false?
Very good. You are correct. But even without that, it's just continuing to change the color back to white, so it's not visible. But you are correct about that.
Right.
Yep. So you have to turn off the timer here, so it doesn't tick again. You're correct. Very good. Good observation. Even though it's not visible. Okay. Good job. Okay. Any other questions? Yep.
Just as our programs get more complicated and
Mhm.
stuff, is there any kind of a style guide that we should follow insofar as
It's-
placement of blocks?
It's
or
all up to you. Now I can only give you one tip, okay? If you can place your blocks horizontally, or you can place your blocks vertically. the advantage of horizontal placement is you usually don't have to move things around too much because you can leave enough space horizontally between the blocks, and each block can now get longer and longer and longer without having to move other blocks around. The chances of your blocks going wider is less than the chances of getting vertically longer. So I think there's a way to automatically rearrange your projects. So if you right click on a blank area here, you can say arrange blocks horizontally, arrange blocks vertically. You can even sort blocks by category. And each one has its own nice thing and not so nice thing. So I just click on the horizontal arrangement. You can select, arrange it vertically. And you can see that if you arrange things vertically, it just stack, all the blocks, one on top of the other, which is nice to look at, and you only have one vertical scroll bar to deal with. But if you want to do any editing, it gets tough. Because to insert code, let's say I want to insert code into the timer handler, which is this one here, it makes it kind of difficult to read because the touch handler is right below that. So it makes it kind of harder, but if you do it horizontally, it is a little bit easier. You can always just pull a block to the side when you're editing it. So you can basically just say, okay, I need to extend the code. So you put it to the side, then you have all the room here to extend it. And after you do that, then you can right click and say, okay, let's arrange blocks vertically again. But the problem is, the next time you arrange blocks vertically, you don't know how it is going to order the blocks. Sometimes it changes the ordering. So what used to be here can now be moved somewhere else. So as your program gets complicated, it does get difficult to locate your blocks because there will be so many blocks, and if you do the auto arrange, sometimes it can move things around. So when you think, okay, I remember that used to be here, it's not there anymore. It's kind of like in a household. I'm kind of messy, and then when my wife would come and clean up my stuff. But after that, yes, the house is cleaner, it's more organized, but I cannot find my stuff anymore. And it's the same thing here. The auto arrange is exactly doing what my wife would do, is to arrange things. Everything is now tidy, organized. But what I remember, I remember that thing used to be over there. It's not there anymore. It's somewhere else. So it is challenging, and that's one of the limitations of graphical programming. Okay, because with text, it's easier. Okay, because with text, I can just show you right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and use mousepad here. With text, it's easy because you can say this is one line. This is another line. But if you want to insert a line between these two, you just press the enter key here. Everything, all the lines below this one get shifted down by one line. So you don't have a problem of, oh, I need to insert something here. It doesn't, it automatically creates the space and shifts everything around to create that space for you. But with graphical programming, it doesn't have that ability. So even though the drag and drop is easy, there's no syntax to learn, you do end up with certain limitations that text programming does not have.
So for readability, as well as if I go back to my program 6 months from now or a year from now, is there a way for me to be able to organize it such that either I or myself or someone else will be able to easily read it?
Okay, here's one thing you can do. You can arrange things in a certain way, and just do it vertically. And what you can also do is to collapse the blocks. So when you collapse the blocks, we are not losing the content of the blocks. We are simply hiding the content of the blocks. So if you do it this way and you comment, I'm not sure whether even the comments will show. Doesn't look like the comments show in this mode. So it makes it easier to see all your blocks because now we can put all of these blocks kind of closer together. And when you do need to change one, then you put it to the side and you expand it and edit it. When you're done, you collapse it again and put it back here. So this way you avoid having the necessity to use the auto arrangement because this is all your own arrangement. But at the same time, you don't have to deal with, oh, I need to make more space because normally it is not showing the actual detail of the block. So there are things like this that you can do. You know, there's no real easy solution or no best practices. It's personal.
I did notice that an option in there was to organize them by the
Category.
By the category.
Right.
So if I was just looking for all of my event handlers related to one item, and I kept those together.
Yep.
then
And it's also sorted alphabetically. So that makes it a little bit easier, because if you know, oh, it is something that the canvas is doing, then you know, okay, B, C, okay, and within the C you have block 1, you have canvas, but CA goes before CL, so that gives you a little bit more organization, because it's alphabetically sorted.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So, but it's still tough, okay, with graphical programming, you still end up with certain issues when you need to change a program, and sometimes you have to move things around. Okay. All right. So now that we got this out of the way, we'll go back to the class here, and you have a new homework assignment. It is called Catch That Bouncing Ball with Scoring. So this time we are going to attach more logic to what we already have described in the homework that was due today. This one is due in a week, okay, so you have 7 days to work on this one. And we do meet next Monday, so if you have any questions about this particular project, next Monday, when we meet in class, that's a good time to ask the questions. The project name is kind of the same as before, except there's a 2 here, okay, so this is number 2. And the project is going to be based on the previous one. You can use my code, okay, remember to fix that little thing about, turning off the timer, because I didn't save the version of that particular version. I want you to add the following logic to your blocks. Use a single global variable to track a number. I'll just call it XP for hit points, okay? Create a button to start the game. Until the button is clicked, the ball should not move or react to any touch events. So this time, I don't want the game to start right off the bat, okay? I want people to click a button to start the game. When the button is clicked, there's only one button, so when the button is clicked, change the background color to white, initialize HP, the hit point variable, to 10, okay, the number 10, and start the game. The ball should start to move, and it should now start to react to touch events. Each time the ball bounces off a wall, I want the variable HP to decrease by 1. The value should decrease by 1. If HP gets down to 0, I want you to change the background color to red specifically, stop the ball, and announce using a notifier that the game is over. So if you do not do anything, okay, the ball will keep bouncing, right? But every time it bounces, the counter HP will decrease by 1. So after bouncing 10 times, it will get down to 0. And at that time, this logic should kick in, and basically, okay, you turn the background color of the canvas to red, stop the ball, and just announce using a notifier. And you can choose any way to use a notifier. That one is up to you, okay? To announce the game is over. Okay? Is that okay so far? So I would do it up to this point first before we add the extra logic, which is down here. If the ball is clicked before it hits a wall, okay, well, this part is not really relevant, because it's basically just every single time the ball is clicked, make it bounce back as if it touches a wall. The the quote-unquote wall is based on which boundary the ball is closest to at the time it is clicked. And I also want you to increase HP by 1. So every time you successfully click on the ball itself, increase HP. So this way, if someone can catch the ball all the time before it gets to a wall, the game will basically just continue indefinitely. Because every time you click it successfully, it increases HP by 1. So it will take longer for HP to decrease to 0. Is that okay? Okay, let me describe several scenarios. So let's say this is the canvas, and the ball is already bounced off the wall going in this direction. Okay? And somebody click it here. according to the instruction, you want to make it as if it bounces off the wall that is closest to the position of the ball at this point. So which wall are we talking about? This wall here. Okay. I'm not really sure what it's going to do. When you bounce it, out of this wall here, it may not be favorable because it might change the direction of the wall and make it go back to the wall that it just bounces off from. Okay. So what you want to do, to play this game, is you want to, when the ball is heading in this direction, that is the right time to click it. Because when you click it here, this wall is closest to the ball. So it will just bounce back in this direction as if it has already hit this wall. And you will increase XP by 1. So not only are you avoiding decreasing XP by 1, because when it does touch this wall, it will decrease XP by 1. You're increasing XP by 1 to prolong the game, so the game will go longer and longer. Is that okay? Does everybody understand what I mean by this? Okay. So you will need a way to figure out how far your sprite is from the edge of the 4 walls, because only then you can determine how to bounce. So how do we do this calculation?
You get the edge information from the bounce.
But it's not bouncing yet. Remember, when you're clicking here, it has not bounced yet. So there are several pieces of information that you need. First one is the XY coordinate of the sprite itself. Okay, because you need to know exactly where the sprite is. Next one is you have to figure out, okay, how far are we from here? That's the easy one, because the X coordinate is basically just telling you that particular distance. That's the easy one. Okay. You also have to determine the Y distance. The Y distance is here. That's exactly what this Y is. So those are the 2 easy ones. But the harder ones would be this distance here, because that distance is based on the width of the canvas and the position of the ball. So you have to do a subtraction to find out what is this particular distance. Are we doing okay so far with that? Sort of? Okay. And you also have to find out what is this particular distance, because if it is close, so you have to figure out which wall is the closest, and then use that to determine what number you pass to the bounce block. So I think of all the things that you have to do with this particular new homework assignment, this is going to be the most complicated piece. Are there any questions about what you're supposed to do, what the program has to do? Yep.
There's no way of restarting the program without closing it. So once it hits the game over screen, there's no way to reinitialize the program.
No, the button. Remember the start button? The start button will reinitialize the background color,
okay.
and it will also change XP back to 10, and then start the game again.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it does reset, the whole game.
I was imagining that the start button was on like a different screen, or was like an over.
No, it's on
screen.
this particular screen.
Okay.
Yep, it's on the same screen.
Gotcha.
Yep. So are there any questions about this part here? This is the most complicated part. You might need to spend some time to do this part here. What might be helpful is to display the numbers. Okay, display the X and the Y, and figure out a way to display the width and the height of the canvas, because you have to have those numbers first before you can do the rest. Can we draw text in a canvas? Yes, we can. So use that feature to help you. Okay. You can also use, for debugging purposes, you can also use just a label. Okay. And every time you touch the ball, you change the label to reflect the XY coordinate of the sprite. So that can help you identify, oh, okay, I can see those numbers is blah, blah, and blah, blah here, and when the ball is over here, the numbers are blah, blah, and blah, blah, okay? So that can help you determine, okay, so what do I need to do with these numbers? Once you know what the numbers look like, it will help you determine what to do with the numbers. You can use two other labels or one other label to display the width and also the height of the canvas. How do you get those numbers? Okay. If I go back to all the blocks here, I go to the canvas. It's one of the it's two properties of a canvas, right? Because you can set the height, you can also set the width. So I would just play with these two first. Okay, print those out into a label. Okay, change a label to the width, change a label to the height, then you have those numbers. Okay. Are there any questions about how to get started with this project? No questions? Okay. And then yep, go ahead.
Do you want us to retain the function where when you press the ball, the background color changes?
Well, since the original program had that feature, we can just keep it. Yep. It should not interfere with the additional stuff that we are doing. Okay. Any other questions? No other questions? Okay. So I'll let you guys think about this for a little bit, okay? Because then I'm gonna go ahead and talk about something else, okay? But if you have any questions related to the homework assignment, just let me know and then we'll address that. So the other thing that we want to talk about today are subroutines, okay? You know, and if you're taking cisp 300, you will eventually get to subroutines. But we'll go ahead and start with subroutines today and explain what it is. Okay. To explain what a subroutine is it's a way to help you organize your program. If there is something that you need to do from multiple places of your program, turning it into a subroutine is going to be helpful. Okay? So I'll give you one example here. In fact, I'm going to use my bouncing ball homework assignment as an example. So let me go back to my projects. We go back to the bouncing project, okay? And let's just say that we go back to the designer and then we say, you know what, I want to add a start button here. So I would go to user interface, drag a start button, change the name of this button to start, okay, that. And this will start this will start the game. I don't want to do your homework assignment, so I'll just say that if I click the start button, it will restart the whole game. But if I touch the canvas and the empty space of the canvas, that will also trigger the restart of the entire game. Okay, that's what I want to do. There are several things I want to do when I restart the game. I want to make sure the background color is white. Okay, I want to make sure that other things are being done the way they're supposed to. So when we have a game like this, or when we want the logic to be like this, we go to blocks and then we say, okay, it's no big deal, we know how to do this. We go to button 1, and we say when button 1 is clicked, we'll do the initialization code, which is really just changing the canvas background color back to white. Okay, and we already have that block somewhere else, but I'm just going to do it again here. So we want to set the canvas background color to white. So we go to here, pick out the color, and then we just put it here. That's the initialization, which is basically the same thing that we have to do with when the timer has expired. Okay? But there are other things that I want to do too. This is not the only place. The other time I want to change the background color back to white is when I first enter the application, when the application first starts. So I might want to attach this code also to screen 1 initialize. So when screen 1 initializes, I want the same code here. Now this is what you should be looking for. If you right click on a block or several blocks and you duplicate and you put it somewhere else, that's a good way to ask yourself and go like, is there a better way to do this? Okay, because copy and paste is generally speaking a bad idea in programming. Okay, so I'm going to do this first, and then we'll talk about what a subroutine is. All right, so this is good. And I said, if you touch the canvas where the sprite is not located, then we'll also restart the game. So we'll go to canvas 1, and then we just go to canvas 1 and go to the touched event of the canvas itself and do the same thing. So once again, I use copy and paste. And remember, every time you do a copy and paste, you have to ask yourself, is there a better way to do it? Okay, so now I have 3 places where I have the quote-unquote initialization code of setting the background color back to white. Is that okay? Okay, so let's also say that I want to have a little theme music when the game starts. Okay, so that I want that to be associated with the starting of the game. So now what do? I have to, upload a piece of music, attach that code, and I have now 3 places to put that code. But you can see that in your homework assignment, the reinitialization of HP can also go to those 3 places. So you can see that as I try to make the program more complicated, more fun, I will be attaching code to all 3 places at the same time. What if I forget one of those 3 places? App Inventor doesn't know. It doesn't know that, oh, you know what, those 3 places really should be doing exactly the same thing. So this is where a subroutine can come in handy. Because instead of spreading out my blocks all over the place and make them all scatter, I can now do something like this. I can use a procedure, or otherwise known as a subroutine. So I'm going to go to the subroutine or the procedure block here. There are 2 types of procedures in App Inventor. The first one, which is the top one, will just let you do something, but it doesn't let you specify a result. The second one, the one at the bottom, is kind of like the first one, except that you can specify a particular result. And that result can now be used in a computation. It can be added or subtracted. Depending on what type of a result you're giving back, it can now be utilized right away inside another block. Are we gonna do okay with that concept? Okay, so we'll go with the first one, which is an easier one. Okay, so we'll take on the first one, this one, and I'm not worrying about this little blue block here because it allows me to specify parameters. We are not dealing with parameters just yet. We do want to change the name of the procedure. So let's just say that I want to change the name of this procedure to initialize. Okay, initialize game. Okay. You can name it, as anything, but you should name it, based on what it is supposed to do in your application. So in this case, I want this block to do everything that I need to do to initialize the game. Resetting the counter, maybe. Okay. Changing the background color, maybe. Stopping the ball, maybe. Okay, so I put all the logic into here. Okay, starting the ball to roll, maybe here. So now, instead of spreading this block all over the place, I just put it here. Wherever I need to do the initialization, what do? I go to procedures and look at procedures now. It is a little bit different from earlier. How is it different from earlier? What is new here?
As another call.
Exactly. It has a block that says call initialize game. It is here because now we have defined a procedure with the name of initialize game. So now it becomes a new block that you can use throughout your app. Every time you want to trigger that logic to execute, instead of replicating whatever is inside this block here, you can now just say, hey, call initialize game. Okay? So I'm going to substitute the call to initialize game wherever I used to have just this block here. So I will do the same thing here, and also at the top here, get rid of changing the color and replace it with call initialize game. Are we doing okay so far? Okay. So later on, if I have other things to do, like making the ball direction random, okay? Then I can just, instead of having 3 places to put that logic, now I just say, hey, I want to change the heading of the ball to a random direction. But I don't have to put it in the other places. I have one centralized place to do it. So I can just go here, go to math, pick out a random number. So random number is, there we go, random integer. And the direction or the heading of the ball can go from 0 degrees to 359 degrees. So I can do the randomization all over here. And because the other places are only calling this particular block, now they will all do the randomization of the heading of the ball. Are we doing okay so far in terms of the concept of a procedure? A procedure is also called a subroutine. It is also called a function. It's also called a module, a method, depending on the context. Okay? But they all mean the same thing. It is just a place. First of all, it is named. Okay? A procedure is always named so that you can refer to it. The second thing is it contains a little block of code. So to trigger the execution of this block of code, we just call it. Are we doing okay so far with that concept? What if I want to add something else to this, like reinitializing the clock so it doesn't trigger the timer, blah 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 blah. Stash it all here. Okay? So if I really want to make sure that the game is started correctly, I go to the clock and I say, hey, I want to make sure the clock is not enabled, and I want to make sure the interval is 500 milliseconds. So we say set clock 1 time interval to 500. Put it here. Just in case, for whatever reason, I change that interval to something else, now I make sure that at the beginning of the game, it is reset back to 500 milliseconds. So whatever you want to put, you can just put it here. So without the use of this procedure, I would have to sprinkle all this code all over the place 3 times, right? Yep.
So the question is, can you actually add a new screen that says that basically you start the game and then basically the game goes through the screen, or basically do you want it all on one screen?
At this point, your homework, as far as your homework assignment is concerned, we only need everything on the same screen. Because to pass information between screens is a little bit tricky. They do not share variables. You can use TinyDB, which is an awful way to do it. So there are different ways to share information among screens. Okay. Any other questions? Any other questions? Going once, going twice. Okay, here's the next question. Can I call another procedure inside the definition of a procedure? The answer is yes. Okay, not a problem. Okay. Now, sometimes you may not have something that you need to access all over the place. Okay, because remember in this case, initialize game is called from 3 different places. We want it here, we want it here, and we also want it here. Okay, and it makes sense to turn it into a subroutine. Other times you want to use a procedure because you want to specify a relatively complicated piece of code, but you don't want it to be inside the other block of code because it just makes everything hard to read. Okay, I would say this logic, can use its own procedure. So in this case, you're trying to figure out what is the closest wall to a particular sprite. Okay, so that means your procedure will need 3 additional things. One is it has to return a result. It has to tell you which wall is the closest. It has to return a number, because that number is what you need to pass to bounce. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, or the second and the third, is, hey, where's the sprite right now? Because that's the information that the procedure needs to do the computation. Okay? So how much you want to push it is entirely up to you, because you only have one sprite, right? So if you want to figure out which wall is closest to that sprite, you can just refer to sprite 1. If you want to figure out what is the width or the height of the canvas, you only have one canvas, right? So you can just refer to canvas 1. So in other words, you don't really have to pass any parameters, and you can just rely on the name of the objects, canvas 1. You can refer to the name sprite 1, okay, or ball 1 in this case, to figure out, oh, okay, we can just do it that way. Okay, I'll just give you an example. So let's just say that I define a new procedure, but this time I do want to specify a result, because the result is the wall. I'm not going to do your homework assignments, so this is not going to be the exact code that you need, but it will be close. Well, in terms of structure. Okay, so I would say which closest wall. Okay, this would be a good name for that. Closest wall is the name of the procedure. Now you can see that this one does have a result. Okay, in fact, this is the only block. This is the only thing you can attach code to, is this little notch here. Which also means if you go to control, there are very few. There is one, but there are very few control blocks that can fit into this notch here. If you go to control and you just pull a normal conditional statement, it won't click. See? It doesn't click at all because the shape doesn't match. With a conditional statement, there's a little notch here and there's a little tab down here. It doesn't match what is expected in a subroutine that returns a result. So this won't work. What do you think is going to work? Well, you have to. Sorry?
If then else.
If then else, do result. Okay, these will work because you can see there's a little tab that matches the shape of the notch here. This little notch and this little tab here, they match exactly. Okay, so those are the things that you can specify to put inside that thing. Okay, so we'll just go ahead. I'm going to pick this one here. Okay, and I'll give you, something that is incorrect, as in it's not the right answer. Okay. But it will show you, what you can do with this. So you can basically say, I don't know. I'm just going to give you the wrong answer here. So you can refer to the XY coordinate of the ball. So I'll just pick out the position of X of the ball, and I'll pick out maybe the width of the canvas. Okay, so I pick out the width of the canvas, and we'll do a comparison. Okay, we go to math. Do a comparison, and I'm going to do this is all random, okay, so this is definitely not supposed to work. So I compare the X coordinate of the ball with the width of the canvas, and if it is greater than, okay, this becomes a condition. If that is the case, I want to return a incorrect answer of 2, otherwise I want to return an incorrect answer of 6. Okay? I'm pretty sure this is the wrong logic. But that's not the point. I don't want to give you the logic. I want to give you the idea what type of block you need to put here. Okay? Alright, so now that we have closest wall as a procedure, how do we use it? How do we call that thing? Let's click on procedures and see what new item we're going to get this time. Oh, cool. We got a new block now, right? We got a new block which is call closest wall. But it's different from the other one because it returns a result. Okay? The call to closest wall itself can be used as a value for comparison, or if you want to call bounds, okay, this plugs right into the notch of bounds. Are we doing okay so far with this? Is that okay? All right. Okay. But then you might say, oh, but I want to write a game where there are multiple canvases, and in each canvas there are multiple sprites, multiple balls. Okay, and I want to apply the same logic. I want to figure out what is the closest wall of this particular sprite inside this particular canvas. What am I going to do? Well, we can copy and paste closest wall and just change, ball 1 to whatever ball you want to refer to. Change canvas 1 to whatever canvas you want to refer to. But then you'll be copying and pasting. What did I say a little earlier? Every time you copy and paste, you have to ask yourself, is there a better way to do it? And there is a better way to do this, okay? It's called parameters. Now this is a little bit more advanced, so if you feel that, oh, I have no idea what you're talking about, you do not have to do it this way, okay? But I do want to point out, how you can clean up the code of a particular application. It will help you organize the code as the complexity of the program increases, okay? So I'll just give you this as an example, as an exposure. So don't worry if you say, okay, this is way too much, I don't want to deal with this. Fine, not a problem. So the way to do this is to click on this little blue box here. That little blue box allows you to specify quote-unquote inputs. Each input is basically what we call a parameter. So in CISP 300, in 370, in 360, they will call these things parameters. They are additional pieces of information that your procedure can utilize so that you don't need to refer to global variables. What global variables? We don't have a single global variable in this entire program. Well, guess what? All of the objects are global variables. Ball 1 is a global variable. Why do you think that is a global variable? Because we can refer to it from anywhere within the program. It has a global scope. Okay? And it is a variable. It is an object, but it is also a variable because it has attributes that can change over time. The X, the Y, the color, okay? All of those things can change. So ball 1 is a variable. It is not a simple variable that is just a number, but nonetheless, it is a variable, and it is a global variable. Okay? Now, in general programming, you want to minimize the use of global variable, which means inside the procedure, like closest wall here, you do not want to refer to anything that has a global scope. Ball 1 has a global scope. Canvas 1 has a global scope. You want to minimize the use of those things because you don't want to accidentally do something to an object, to a global variable, and you cannot see it from the outside of the procedure. Okay? So now we'll say, okay, so how do we fix this problem? I'm going to specify 2 inputs into this whole thing. So this is 1, and we'll go ahead and put in another 1. Okay? Every time you put in something, you can change the name of that thing. So I'm going to say, just ball here, and this one is going to be canvas. Okay? And now we have your ball and canvas as what we call parameters. Oh, but how do we change here? What do we do about this guy here? Okay, so let's go ahead and get rid of this guy. All right, so now that ball itself is a parameter, how do we refer to the x-coordinate of ball as a parameter? We have seen something like this already. It's just a little bit awkward. We didn't really talk about it much. Let's go to ball 1 and scroll all the way to the bottom. There was one little thing. I was fairly sure there was a way to do this. Let me see if I remember how to do it. Okay. So we'll drag out this block, put it here, change it from I'll have to think about this a little bit. Because I remember there is a way to do this, I just can't recall how to do it. how to refer to the X property of a ball, but only use it as a parameter. Sorry? Okay. Give me 2 minutes. Okay, let me see if I can get this figured out in 2 minutes. If I can't, we'll just move on. It's not these. It's variables. It's not those. Oh, I got it. Any components. There we go. Any ball. There we go. So we can refer to the x coordinate of a particular component, and that component is our parameter ball, and then we can just put it here. That's it. That's how you do it. Forgot about that. There we go. I knew there's a way to do it, I just forgot how to do it. Okay, so any canvas, and then we want to refer to the width of the canvas. So we go to canvas width, all the way down here, of a particular component. But which component are we talking about? Our parameter canvas. There we go. So now, this little procedure is now much more general because it can figure out what is the closest wall of any ball sprite to in any particular canvas. If you have like 2 balls within the same canvas, you can change the parameter. Which ball are you passing to this as the parameter ball, and which canvas are you passing as the parameter canvas? Now you can reuse exactly the same procedure regardless of which ball sprite you're talking about and which canvas you're talking about. So you don't have to replicate the procedure over and over again. But it will change the way you call the procedure. So if I go back to how this procedure is going to be called, it's going to be different. So when I go to procedure, you can see that now it has 2 little notches. Okay? And which means if I want to utilize this procedure, let's say we want to utilize this procedure in our touch event here. So we want to go to the ball touch event. And this is what I'm talking about earlier. You know, when your program gets a little bit more complicated, it does get a little bit kind of nasty to deal with this. So now I can say, okay, let's go ahead and try to bounce the ball. So we go to ball 1. We specify the bounce call right here. And the edge is going to be based on a call to the procedure of the closest wall, which is this one here. Here's the magic. Which ball are we talking about? We want to specify ball 1, right? But how can we refer to just ball 1 all by itself and not one of the properties of ball 1? You go to ball 1, go all the way to the bottom. And here we can just say, hey, we are referring to the entire ball 1. And now we can specify that as a parameter. Same thing with canvas 1. You go to canvas 1, you go all the way to the bottom here, and you just select canvas 1, and then you put it here. So now, if I have several canvases of this application, I can just reuse this particular procedure. I can reuse closest wall, and just by giving it a different ball and a different canvas each time, now I can reuse the same logic to figure out which wall is closest to that ball, to that particular wall. Is that okay? It's a little bit complicated. You do not have to do it, in this class. But I do want to kind of point out, this is a feature that you can use. This is a very common feature in any programming language, in C, C++, Java, PHP, Perl. All practical programming languages have this kind of feature. Okay. So what you're learning here is not something, oh, this is kind of complicated, and I'm not going to be able to use the same concept again in any type of other programming. No, you cannot be more wrong. Okay, if that is what you're thinking, you cannot be more wrong. This is a general programming concept that you can reuse regardless of the programming language. Okay, it's called parameterizing, a procedure. It's trying to pull out as much as you can out of the procedure, so it's not locked down to specific items in your program. Is that okay? Sort of? All right. And this is what I'm talking about. This code really is kind of hard to read because it is overlapping with another block. So as soon as I'm done with this, I can collect it again so it doesn't take up that much space. Questions? Let's go ahead and reorganize everything. Let's collect all the blocks and then reorganize by sort blocks by category and see how it does it. So it will do it alphabetically because you can see, this is B, 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 A, B, U, right? And then we have C, A, C, L, C, L, I, N, and then S, C. So it is alphabetically sorted in a way, it's easier to find things because it's alphabetically sorted. But when you have too many of these things, it is still a little hard to find stuff. And unfortunately, with this type of programming, drag and drop programming, there's really just no easy way to get around that problem. Okay, I think somebody asked me about, can I copy something from one project to another project, right? So let's see if we can do that. So let's say I want to copy this procedure to another project of mine. Okay, the backpack is what you need to do. Okay, so if you click on the backpack documentation. So it says right here, the backpack is a copy-paste feature. It allows you to copy blocks from one project or screen and paste them into another project or screen. To copy, you can drag and drop blocks into the backpack. To paste, click on the backpack icon and drag and drop blocks into the workspace. So let's go ahead and try this, okay? So let's say this is the closest wall procedure is what I want to copy into another project. So you put it into this thing here. And you can see it doesn't really destroy in the original project. Then you go to another project. You go to projects, and we'll switch to another project of mine. We'll switch to sub, which is the new project. It is completely blank at this point. Go to blocks again, click on the backpack, and now we can drag it over to the new project. And you can do it to multiple things at the same time. So if there are like 3 blocks that you want to copy and paste, you can put them all into the backpack, switch to the other project, and then when you click on the backpack, you will see the 3 blocks that you have put into the backpack. You can then drag those blocks into the new project. Is that helpful? Okay. And this is a new feature. Last time I taught this class, there was no backpack. If there's no backpack, it is really hard. It's not impossible. It's just really hard to copy code from one project to another project. You basically, what you need to do is to open up the AIA file, and they will. There are certain XML files, and then you have to use a text editor to actually do surgery on the project and copy some code from one project to another project. It can be done, but it's you have to do surgical operations to get it done. But this is a lot easier. It's all done by the GUI interface. All right. Any other questions? Okay, no other questions. I forgot to do one thing again. And I think I even forgot to bring my row sheet. So I guess there won't be any row taking since I don't have a row sheet. Are you guys all signed in into Moodle or not?
The Moodle?
No? You're not signed in?
No, I signed in.
You signed in?
Just
Is it
signed
okay? Is anyone not signing into Moodle? Okay, can you sign in right now? Because I can then just use whoever signed in as a role taking mechanism. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. We'll come back after a 10-minute break, and then you guys can get started with your new homework assignment. If you have any questions about a new homework assignment, I can try my best to answer your questions. But I cannot show you how it is done. I can only kind of help guide you to the solution. All right, I'm going to stop the recorder unless there are additional questions. Yep, go ahead.
Do you know if there's a way to do push notifications?
Push
notifications? I didn't see any way of doing that.
I don't understand what do you mean by pushing the notifications?
Like the app sends a notification to your phone.
It's Apple. When you get like, if you have your Twitter app open and somebody updates something or you get a message or whatever, that little pull down thing from the top will have a little notification.
Oh, okay, the notification bar thing.
Yeah.
I don't think you can do it from inside App Inventor. Because App Inventor gives you a sandbox to play with, and there are certain things that you can do inside the sandbox, and that's not exposed to the sandbox. Sorry. You can probably do something later on, and you can. App Inventor does give you the ability to communicate with other applications, so you can start another application from within your app directly. Not sure whether that would help or not, but there is an option here. Yep.
Just let you know that the homework assignment for the bouncing ball is scoring. If you look at Moodle, it says assignment is due today at 10 a.m. and it says assignment overdue by an hour and 20 minutes.
Oh, the new one?
Yeah, the new one.
Oh, I forgot to change the due date. Thank you. Let's go ahead and change that. Oh yeah.
Yeah, because it is overdue by an hour.
We are all past due then.
Yeah.
That's not good. Let's fix that. That's an easy one to fix.
Professor, is there a particular reason why we use App Inventor? Is that the most common one for Android?
Okay, with a class like this where there's no prerequisite to have taken Java programming before, to get into actual Java programming, which is the native programming language of applications, that will take the entire semester to get a program to respond to a click.
Oh.
So we won't be doing anything fun at all, if we're not using App Inventor. The second class, cisp362, uses Java and the Android Studio to develop applications. So you have all the flexibility. Everything that you can do in Android, you can do it in that particular interface. But then, people who take that class or people who will take that class will quickly find out and go like, okay, I did not realize responding to a button or responding to something like this would involve this much code. Okay, because it is a lot more complicated, because the first thing you have to do is to understand Java. You have to learn a programming language first, unless you already know what Java is. And then on top of that, learning the language itself is the least of the worries. Okay, I know Java for the most part already. The key is how do you deal with the object-oriented programming stuff? What are those classes? And it's not atypical that when I write programs natively in Java for apps in Android, I would open up 20 tabs in my browser. And I need to constantly go back to the tabs, back and forth, to figure out how to do something. So, that would pretty much take all the fun out of writing apps, because you'll be struggling with the programming language, the programming tool, the entire day. That just you won't get much done. App Inventor gives you the ability to throw something together real quick. You get results. Okay, you get results right away. It does have limitations. Okay, but I think the trade-off is reasonable. because it does give you a very easy interface. You can throw something together, it works. Okay, it does have limitations. It doesn't look very good, okay, but it does work. But the next class, depending on how many people sign up for cisp363, because that will determine whether that class gets a go or not. If that class goes, then we'll actually use Java and Android Studio to start writing applications.
Is that does that require a prereq?
That one has a prerequisite of this class and a co-requisite of CISP360, which is our C++ programming class. And the idea, okay, this is the reason, this is my rationale, may or may not be reasonable. So the idea is for people to take, for someone who has absolutely no programming background, okay, the idea is they can take CISP300, CISP362, which is this class, in one semester. And then they can take CISP360, which requires 300 as a prerequisite, and CISP363, which has a prerequisite of 362 in a second semester. So in 1 year, okay, someone can complete the 4 required courses for this certificate. So they can basically get it all done in 2 semesters, assuming the classes get offered if enough people sign up. The other colleges structure this completely differently. Okay, if you go to Folsom Lake or Sac City, they copied and pasted my curriculum for the most part, except for one thing. They did not copy the structure of the classes. So their way of structuring their classes is linear. So they want CISP 300, CISP 360, CISP 401, which is the Java class. After these 3, then you can take CISP 362 and CISP 363. How many semesters is it going to take? We're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Assuming those classes are offered. And you can actually get into those classes because it's all sequential. I try to make things kind of more parallel. But when I try to make these things parallel, I cannot assume people in this class to have any knowledge of C++ programming, okay, let alone Java or object-oriented programming. But I still want you guys to be able to do something like the bouncing ball, and all the other homework assignments. We'll still be able to do all that using App Inventor. So is that kind of addressing your question?
Yeah,
I'm not saying this is, sorry, oh, okay. I'm not saying this is the right approach, okay, because some people say, okay, but you can only go so far with App Inventor, and the answer is yes, I can only go so far, but it does address maybe 80% of the apps that people are writing, okay? It's good enough to give people an exposure, okay? If you have something that is relatively simple to handle, this may give you all the things that you need. But you can still get to 363 to get to the more in-depth programming using Java and using the Android framework. The other classes or the other colleges want you to take all of these classes, but in a sequence. And that's going to take at least 5 semesters, 2 years. So that's my rationale of organizing my classes in a particular way and not use the linear fashion. I'm just curious, how many people here already know something about programming prior to taking this class? Okay, so we have kind of a majority, but not the entire class. And even with people with programming background, that varies. Okay, what was the last time you wrote programs, and what programming language did you use? Did you use object-oriented programming or not? There's a variety of background. And the way it is structured is, okay, you do not even have to have any programming background coming into this class. You just have to take 300 along with this class. That's all. I'm going to stop the recorder, and I'm going to get my coffee. And then when we come back, we'll